Thank you for listening to the Following Films podcast. Today I'm joined by Steven Feinartz, director of the new documentary film Are We Good? The film is an intimate portrait of comedian and podcast pioneer Marc Maron. Following the sudden loss of his partner and filmmaker Lynn Shelton, Maron struggles with grief, disillusionment, and a shifting comedy landscape. The film features interviews with comics including Nate Bargatze, John Mulaney, David Cross, Kamau Bell, and Laurie Kilmartin, as well as WTF podcast footage from his interviews with President Barack Obama, Andrew Garfield, Patton Oswalt, and many more. Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Google Workspace. We keep things running smoothly and efficiently at Following Films with the convenience of cloud-based Google Workspace programs. You should give it a try and see how it can benefit your business as well. If you sign up using my link, I can give you a discount, and it helps to support the show. Go to the show notes for a direct link. The film is in New York and Los Angeles on October 3rd, with a nationwide theatrical release on October 5th and 8th. For showtimes, go to arewegoodmarin.com. Hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, man. I really appreciate it. I love the film. It's my favorite documentaries are often ones that are about a specific subject, being like a person or an event, then end up being about something else. Where this is really, I think you could give or take the Marc Maron of this particular story, and really it's just a really universal story about how we deal with grief. And was that what you had planned on when you initially were embarking on this story?
It's a good question. I think originally it was, Marc is a fascinating guy, and we figured that filming him while going through this, thing in his life, it would be, captivating, and people would be able to take something out of it. We didn't know where it would go exactly. It just seemed like the time to do it, and the actual, the real moment to do a Marc Maron documentary would be while he was, dealing with something quite like this. It could have been done. It could have been a celebrity biodoc on Marc, and that still may even happen in the future. You never know.
Sure.
It felt like something, worthwhile in his life. He had been talking about it on Instagram Live and on the podcast, and he was an open book in that regard. So it felt like the time to capture it on film. Yeah.
And how long did it take to make the film? How long were you shooting for?
Oh man, geez, it was 3.5 years. We did. I mean, it could have been, to be honest with you, it could have been done in 2.5 years, but we had to get the money and the final money.
Sure.
As we were cobbling together the last bits of the money, we were in post, and the third act was it actually happened naturally. If we had ended it earlier, it probably would have been an abrupt ending, and it wouldn't have maybe been as enjoyable, I think, or wouldn't have come full circle quite as much. So I think the extra time probably helped us, but it was annoying. It was annoying to Marc, and it was annoying to me. But that's documentary filmmaking,
Of course. And how much, he seems to wear that annoyance on his sleeve throughout the film, but it's something that after I think you get used to his rhythms, there's a charm to it in a way where it's like your cranky uncle or something like that in a way.
Totally. That's exactly it. Yeah. It was throughout the whole process, but it even was from the beginning. He was just annoyed with putting the lav mic in the next day. And I was like, hey, do you want a documentary that sounds like shit? We could do that too, But no, he was happy to overall with the film, and he was a cranky, but he was the kind of cranky that I knew we were going to get, and Marc knows what's funny about him, and he plays it up. But I will say at the same time, the Marc off stage and the Marc on stage, there's really not much difference. He's pretty much, you see what you get.
Well, there's one thing that really stood out to me in the film when he was talking about his sense of relevance in his stand-up, and I think this special that you're focused on and the most recent special are probably the two most, relevant, or I think these will be specials that go on remembered for a very long time. When the way that he handled grief, and from Bleak to Dark, and then in Panicky, the way that he encapsulates how we annoyed half the country into authoritarianism. I think that is just one of the most wonderful lines that just so beautifully distills down what we've been through for these last 6 years.
Yeah, no, he's as timely as ever right now, and what he's saying, I think he's as relevant as he's ever been. But yeah, both specials were very different. We were filming From Bleak to Dark. We filmed the From Bleak to Dark special in the midst of making the documentary Are We Good? So that was a different thing, because so doing two things at once was a lot, but we figured it out. But the next one, Panic, the film was already done, so we could just really focus on shooting that special. And yeah, I'm proud of both specials. And I think including also End Times Fun, Mark's one, 2018 that Lynn Shelton directed. I think these three in a row are him at the absolute top of his game, each one.
I could not agree with you more. And I've enjoyed him, I'm 49. He was Short Attention Span Theater came out kind of right at that sweet spot when I was in high school and really discovering comedy. And he's always been there as a part of my life. So it's,
cool.
How about you? When did you first get turned on to his stuff?
I mean, I'd seen him on Conan and stuff, and when I was a kid and all that. And I'm 41, so I'm a little younger, but I got turned on to him. Really, I think mostly was in 2009, 2010, when the beginning of WTF.
Sure.
I was one of the early listeners, like a lot of people, and I was just hooked. And then I went to go see the live shows over at UCB in LA and Steve Allen Theater, and got to meet people who were, regular guests on the show, and, just became a fan, just jumped right in that way. But I was instantly hooked when the podcast to me was the perfect medium for him.
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that, despite that so many people, myself including, have a podcast now,
sure, that
it's the beautiful thing about it is there's sort of the gatekeepers have been cut down in a way, and anybody can do this, but that's also the problem, that literally anybody can do it now. So maybe we need gatekeepers again, possibly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's democratizing everything is fine, and making everybody can do it. But yeah, he was a pioneer, one of the first, 3 or 4 comedy podcasts. But yeah, his thing is like Brendan, his podcast producer, says, it's a diary of one man, and and it's essentially, take it or leave it. With the opening, I think the openings of the podcast are the best thing. I mean, I love the interviews, but I really do love the first 10 to 15 minutes. And I do say to people who are watching this movie, like, you better like the first 10 to 15 minutes of the podcast, because that's what it is in movie form, Well,
I think that's what Kamau Bell says. And it's if you're a fan of the guy, that's the part of it. And I think that it adds so much texture, and it gives you just when you're listening to those interviews, you have just a much better idea of where he's coming from through his personal worldview, that you're not just sort of piecing that together through the interviews. It's just being all laid bare. And I think it makes it adds so much more to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd even say that, and somebody else had mentioned this too, that he's there are more conversations, less interviews. He's just, because he does interrupt a lot, obviously, and he interjects his own personal stuff in so many times. So it's less. He is interested in, and he does do so much research in these podcasts, but they're back and forth. They're not. It's not just question and receive and the next question. It's there's a lot to it. I don't think Mark could ever be just an interviewer.
No, yeah. But he is deeply curious, I think, and that's something that I would say that I feel in your film as well, that you are curious about this man, you're curious about him, that it doesn't feel like you go into this with a point of view that you're trying to rise to the top. It does feel like you are really just trying to understand this particular moment in Mark's life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's the only way to do it. You can go in with, you can go with a preconceived idea of what it is, and I've known him since 2010. So, so I went in with the fear that he was going to be mean and give me a hard time and not give me what I want and all that kind of stuff. And I had those fears going in, but after I say like at 4 or 5 days of filming, it pretty much was like, I would just show up and we would just go. It wasn't like that.
So then when you're planning the film out, though, are you thinking about the sort of structure and these are interviews that I need to get and sort of these different points of view, or how are you laying out something like this ahead of time?
Yeah, so Julie Seabaugh, producer and story editor on the film, approached me about doing it in I think it was late 2020, and we talked to Mark in early 21, and then there was an outline, there was like a structure that she had laid out that I was looking at, and then we worked on it together. And most of it was like Mark Mark's, Lynn passes away, and then he builds the hour, and does the hour, and it leads up to the special, and in a way that does happen in the film, and I don't want to. It's not a big spoiler, but there's so much more that goes on that's not just
No.
the hour of stand up special. If anything, we undercut the stand up special, or he does as much as possible. But it became different things. Like any documentary, like any verite. I hesitate to use that word, but anytime you the follow doc kind of thing, you're going to find different. You hopefully are going to find different threads to pull, and we found numerous ones. Too many, unfortunately. There were so many different storylines we could have gone down, but we did have to stay pretty focused on the passing of Lynn and dealing with grief.
Sure.
That was clearly our A story, but we found other ones.
No, there's a lot here, I think, going on. But to touch on something you were just mentioning, this idea of verite, do you think that's even possible to have that sort of objective outside view where you're just witnessing real life? Or is it something, once you turn a camera on something, it does change the world that you're mirroring?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. With every subject is different. Mark is his life he blends on stage and off stage so seamlessly. You know what I mean? Like the podcast and everything. It's just he's always Instagram Live. So he alone is a force in that way, where I think he is not as prone to cameras don't affect him as much. Is what I'm saying. But at the same time, it was just me filming for most of the film. We had a DP who came and set the look for certain scenes, and he was around for some shoot days as well. He did great, but but it was mostly myself and Mark. And I think by me just showing up and shooting poorly, whatever I was doing, trying to shoot while engaging with him because he needs the eye contact and we need to be engaged. I think that helped a lot. Not having a crew there and not having it feel like he had an audience or anything like that, because that's dangerous. If people are laughing and then he's that's like any comedian is gonna have a tough time.
Well, and there are moments where you interact with Mark in the film. There's not a ton of them. It's probably maybe like 3 times where you have lines in there, and I always find it strange when you're filming someone and have them repeat the question so that you can cut yourself out. It feels like you're going for what would be a much more honest portrayal of just this moment, this conversation.
Yeah. There were so many more. There was so much of me talking in earlier cuts, and there was a version of the film where it was heavily meta, like just him busting balls the whole movie. And it would have been interesting, but I think it would have stepped on a lot of the emotion of the film. But no, Mark, he needs that give and take. There needs to be some of the conversation back and forth.
Well, while it wasn't about that, I lost my dad a couple years ago, and it's something that I still kind of wrestle with from time to time. And still, it's just that thing that's always going to be there. I'll never fully get my head around that. And to see the stuff with him and his father in here was really beautiful in a way. It was just to see that genuine love and affection between them, despite the complicated relationship they've had, and not unlike the relationship that I had with my dad, where it was complicated, but there's genuine love and affection there. So it was really, really, I think you've made a powerful film here that goes down easy, which isn't something that's easy to do. To make something that's entertaining and profound is a rare feat.
I really appreciate that, Christopher. That means a lot. Thank you. His dad's a character. We filmed a lot more with him, and there were some funny things here and there. Hopefully we can release some deleted scenes later on. And I really, when you make a doc, when you're following Marc Maron for 3.5 years, you're gonna find there were so many great scenes that didn't make it into the film, and especially with him and his dad, and him with other comedians and whatnot. And hopefully we'll find a place for that at some point.
Well, I sincerely hope you do. I know we're out of time right now, but this is something that I would absolutely go back. I assume you have hundreds of hours possibly of footage here that you could go back and cut. When the subject is Marc Maron, you could probably have 3 or 4 valid films that you could have made out of this that are wildly different.
Absolutely. We could have done that. We could have done the 2-part, Gary Shandling thing. We could have easily done that. But nobody's asking for 3 hours of
I've been hanging out with the guy twice a week for 16 years, and I'm sad that he's going away. So I could use a couple more.
Maybe we'll do a sequel. We'll do an unofficial sequel.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much, man. It was a pleasure to meet you, and congratulations on the film. You got a special one here, man.
Thanks so much, Christopher. Really
All right, take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.